So in case you're worried that this is death by PowerPoint and somebody from the ESRI with charts and numbers, I want to promise you there isn't a single number in the whole thing. In fact, there aren't even a lot of words. Really delighted to be asked to do this today, although I'm sort of wondering partly why I am. But I guess when I started to think about it, it seemed to me that one of the issues in relation to the way economists now tend to think increasingly of development is that cities really, really matter in all sorts of countries. And what that means is that a country has to connect to its capital city in particular, but its major cities, not in a more for them and less for us way, but in a realization that those cities are not competing with the rest of the country. So, for example, if the IDA is trying to get a factory into or a business into Dublin, the alternative for that business is possibly Edinburgh, is possibly London, is possibly Barcelona. It's not, in fact, North Kerry. That's not the issue. So that recognition that we have of the them and us, the Jackeens and the rest of the country, is really not a very productive one. This morning I was over at a conference at Dublin Castle, and I kind of came out of that and I said, now, I'd better get a taxi. And then I said, why am I getting a taxi? The distance from Dublin Castle to the ESRI and John Rogerson's Quay is no further than the distance from Dublin Castle to here. So why wouldn't I walk? So I was kind of actually having to deal with my own psychology that the walking through this part of the inner city is not something that I have done almost at all. So it was sort of an eye-opener to me, looking around, seeing what I saw, seeing a lot. I mean, you mentioned actually, Jim, the issue of some of the developments that have taken place, and I have to say it's a hell of a lot better than when I was growing up. I mean, the Liffey was an embarrassment. You could still say it's not the greatest architecture in the world, but at least it has a sense of reduced dereliction. You go a row behind it, it don't look so good, but we can get there, and that's obviously the next piece. So anyway, I want to illustrate my thoughts on this by saying I walk to work every day. And I pass some of you on the way when I go to work every day, some people in this room. And I was thinking, as I was walking, why is it that we should be able, I work east of the city, so southeast of the city. Why would it not be the case that equal distance from the city centre on the other side, you wouldn't have lots of other people doing exactly what I'm doing? And that kind of concept. Yeah, please, yeah. So I'm just going to say, so when economists walk to work, you're going to see what economists think about when they walk to work. Market forces won't sort out the inner city. And I suppose that's my big message. Tax incentives with good planning could. Levies with good planning could. But you cannot just leave the market forces to deliver what you need to deliver. That's I think, really crucial. And then, basically, there has been a lot of discussion about whether or not we need a big idea, an Irish big idea as part of our recovery. People talk about Ardna Crusher, they talk about all sorts of other things. So one possibility is that the inner city could be part of the big idea, or be the big idea. Okay, so the next, yeah. So basically this is Waterloo Road, and this is where I start working every day. And at the end of it, you'll see the sort of St. Martin's House, which was considered to be the kind of abomination of its day. Much improved now by the trees, because you kind of goes halfway up, and they did a remake of the edges of it. Okay? Not all houses on Waterloo Road are in great shape, but one of the points is that if you have some bit of dereliction, but the majority isn't derelict, it's okay. Your eye tunes that out. I had to go looking to remember now where are the derelict houses as I walk along. So one of the big issues about the inner city is the scale of dereliction. So one is okay, a little bit is okay, but when you get a lot, okay? And now we're on to Bagot Street, we're turning the corner, and you can see what's there. Here's a sort of a business that has been closed down. It's looking a bit messy and grubby. Next one. There's another one which is looking even grubbier, but that's only two of a streetscape. So you again can manage, and I think the characteristic of parts of the inner city is that shop after shop after shop, and that's what changes what economists call the spillover effects, the negative spillover effects of dereliction. One doesn't do it, two doesn't do it, but a lot does. So now we're down onto the canal, which is looking very pretty. And the next one. And again, here's some building that's taking place on the canal at the moment. This was a site that was a garden centre that has now been turned into housing of different unit sizes. But that was something which could have sat for a long period of time and would have become very derelict, in fact, if it hadn't been developed. Okay, there's again a derelict house along the canal. Next one. And then off the canal, we've got some Pebbledash. There's a little street it must be the greatest place to live in the whole of Dublin. It's just in behind Merrion Square. It's that piece behind Merrion Square and Mount Street. Okay, next one. So along comes the NTMA, again a building that was built, which of course is where NAMA now lives, a building that was built in that form in order to get maximum value out of the site. They built on the site, they made a huge, ginormous building, which again is very big in the streetscape, but there are some open spaces around it. And the next one, across the road from that, you see the new bikes that have just come in, and you see the NAMA type people jumping out of the building, running across the road and out. I've actually seen them go from the building and onto a bike within 30 seconds. It's incredible. And there's a lovely, right next to the Register of Births, Deaths and Marriages, where I got married a number of years ago, is this wonderful bit of dereliction just sitting there. Now you see the acquired, that's happened since the threat of the levy came. So is it cause and effect? I hope it is. Okay. So you turn around the corner from NAMA, which is this building with lots of, professionals and all sorts of people, and there's a centre right beside it. And you turn, and here's some inner city, local authority housing that's there. Cheek by jowl. In other words, we don't have to have everything all of one kind or another. Further down the street, more housing again. We're going to cross Pier Street. Now this is the one that interests me, because on the right-hand side there you'll see, and I'll picture another picture in a moment, but on the left-hand side is a sort of back end of what's more like a lane, and yet this is a major through road now down to the Grand Canal Theatre, etc. But this isn't dereliction. There's businesses in every one of those, fixing cars, fixing ironworks, doing all sorts of carry on. But so it's what really strikes me is you can have the most expensive building. I mean, I think it's Fry's, the solicitors, are directly opposite this, right? This incredibly new modern building overlooking this. You can have this mixture, but what you can't have is dereliction. Okay. These are the buildings that you can see. So then I turn up the road. This is a little road. This is again an issue where the side wall there is the most threatening part of what I would see as my walk to work, because there's nothing happening down that side, and there's the back end of houses on the left-hand side. And this is the corner of an absolutely huge on-pus site, which, if only the thing had gone on a bit longer, I'm sure they'd have had to sell it, but they didn't. Okay, next one. This is again a derelict building just opposite where I work, and right next to it, next one, is another. This is a derelict site just sitting there right next, and that's where all the mischief takes place, right beside where I work. And it's that fact that it's sitting there. It's been sitting there now for 8 or 9 years, and nothing is happening to it. I have sent you photographs of it before, just so that you know. I just like to keep things going. Okay, and the final site then, the final picture then is just the on-pus site. But I suppose what I'm trying to say to you is, this isn't all a pretty site on a pretty walk to work. It's a mixture of reality of urbanism. It's a mixture of new build, of old build, and it works. And the question is, why can't the inner city have that combination of buildings and types of things that would make it work? Okay, just a couple of word slides now, since I am from the ESRI. So why can't the inner city be a great area to live in? You recognise the cadence of this: a great area to live in, to be born in, to grow up in, to grow old in. Great area to do business in, foreign direct investment coming from other cities. They don't know that we've an inner city hang-up problem. We can just get over it. Great area to study in. I think it's fantastic the NCAD refused to go out to Belfield, and that Belfield is now seeing itself as coming into the NCAD, and a great area to visit. The key issue for me is that the market on its own won't deliver, and it's not just the failures of availability of finance and the state of developers or whatever else. It wouldn't do it anyway, and I think that's really where the planners have to come in and put their heads above the parapet. Next one. So why won't it? Because there's an absence of a credible plan. Unless there's a credible plan, people are not going to make investment decisions to go into an area, because they don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to be 10 or 15 or 20 years before anything else happens? Is it going to be left derelict right next to where they are? There are weak commercial drivers for people coming in, because it's more expensive to build in the city centre than out in the green spaces around the city centre. And there's weak residential attractiveness, because what we do want to do is try to live in an area where we don't see dereliction right beside us. And it's well documented in urban economics that all over the world that when you get that dereliction, you get reduced property values and incentives. There's the wrong relative prices. It is dearer, it is more expensive, it is maybe more onerous to be building in the city centre than elsewhere. And if you want to change that relativity, then you must do something, whether that's incentives in the form of giving people tax breaks, or whether it's levies in terms of penalising them for sitting there on top of derelict sites. One way or the other, you've got to do it. And I don't see any reason why Dublin City Council or the OPW or the state would be treated any differently in that regard to a private sector developer. I think that notion of distinguish between the two is just really bad policy. So there's no cost of ignoring dereliction at the moment. So the gaps create what economists call negative externalities. A final one, I think. So we need a plan, identify the objectives and develop the policies. And one thing for the discussion this morning that I think is really useful thing that economics kind of suggests, we might all differ in the objectives that we want to have. Do we want to have more of this? You might have the size of housing units, you might have the issue of green spaces. We might have differ in the objectives, and let's fight the bit out and work out, an agreed set of objectives. There should never be inconsistency between the policies. In this country, we don't talk about the objectives, we jump to the policies, and then the policies conflict. So we're trying to do one thing, and the policy, one set of other policies, is making us doing exactly the opposite. So that piece of the jigsaw needs to be put together. So the key planning elements, and Jim referred to them, the mixed accommodation, appropriate spaces and density, and sustainable and safe, because if there isn't sustainability and safety, there isn't going to be the kind of development you want. So from an economist's point of view, when I say a low cost of development, I mean a reasonable cost of development. If it's excessively high, it's not going to happen. If the accommodation isn't reasonably costed, then you're not going to get what the kind of mixture that you want. And I think the speed and the pace of development, and this is one thing where the vision really needs to come in. We need to put some timeline in that people can actually connect with. And if it's so far away, it's crazy. If we're trying to do it really fast, it's equally stupid. Don't mention the Great Irish Water as an example of that. I think that's it. Oh, it's not rocket science. So it needs joined-up policies, which is what we're about talking about today, to cover in a non-contradictory way housing, which Jim talked about, but it's land use, it's transport, it's education. For goodness sake, we don't have a method for the Department of Education setting up schools where there are kids. I mean, that's mad. Social services are the same, and it needs to be supported by what I would call visionary political and city leaders, because if you don't have that vision, you're actually only going to get little fixes here and there. Thank you.